Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Full Out Healing Show and Podcast, where I talk about my healing journey as a survivor. I'm your host, Sable, and I'm so excited that you're back to join us today. To join me today. This is episode number 23, and 100 Days of Truth, day 28. Okay. Now, today's episode is going to be another healing tool of the day, and brace yourself, y'all. The healing tool of the day is saying the shameful thing. Okay. I'm going to talk about the dilemma that brought it up, my old strategy around saying the shameful thing. Spoiler alert, it was to not. My moment of surrender, my new strategy, what it does for me, and then, of course, my invitation to you all, okay? So, the dilemma. Well, the dilemma essentially is feeling buried alive in the shame I felt about the violent incidents I experienced, about what I accepted, about feeling shame about what I believed about myself, and also feeling shame for how I felt about her, my ex-wife. Like, I felt ashamed of the way I cared about this person and the way that I loved this person. I felt ashamed because I thought, what's wrong with me? How could I love someone who does these things? And I felt the shame I felt for that intensified after I left, because just because I left, it didn't mean that I stopped loving her and those feelings went away. And then I felt ashamed for that. And I felt ashamed for missing her. It was just shame on shame on shame. I felt lost in a never-ending vortex that felt like it just amplified the struggle of taking a breath. It amplified the struggle of having thoughts. It amplified the struggle of moving. Like, I'm really talking, like, that shame tsunami hit bad right after I left. Like, that was, it was a tough, like, last January, those couple of months, last January, like the beginning of spring, was a really rough time for me. I felt stuck, and I felt like there was no way out of the shame. The shame, which is why I created this show, right? I wanted a place to talk about all of the shame and the sticky feelings that are taboo when it comes to this lived experience. Like, and I'll get into it in more details, but I'm just trying to think of an analogy to describe the depth of shame that I felt. Okay, if you could dig the deepest hole possible on planet Earth, so I guess that's the core, right? Put a little bit of dirt on that core so it's not all the way through, but dig the deepest hole possible, then put me like this in that hole, then put all the dirt back, and then put a mountain range on top of that with a snow avalanche on it. That is how much shame I felt. That's how much shame I felt crushed by. And that's why it felt so hard to move, because it literally felt like I had not the weight of the world, but the weight of all the dirt that filled in the deepest hole you could dig, and a mountain range and an avalanche on top of that, right? That's how much shame I felt for all of these things, for all of these feelings. And my old strategy for dealing with that shame was to not, it was to not deal with it, but that is how I dealt with it. I tried my best to put that shame in a box in a far corner of my mind, okay? I would, at times peek out for light, hoping that I'm not found out, but then I would just retreat. And when I really wasn't ready, because I believed everything the shame was telling me, I would just retreat, and I would reject any information I came across that wasn't aligned to what my shame told me was true about me. I just couldn't integrate it. I couldn't accept that information. I would reflect on milestones of unmet goals, and I would contemplate, I would literally try to, I would say contemplate life, but what I was contemplating wasn't life. I was contemplating a way to live that could completely avoid the shame. And at one point, that I remember feeling so ashamed about how the abuse caused me to cancel and reschedule a work engagement, which led to me losing that contract. Like, I literally thought of, like, even though I went into education to change the world, even though I believe, I know and believe I have a vision and a skill set that can bring about that change, I felt so buried by the shame that I literally was thinking, well, how, maybe there's another way I could learn to exist not doing this work, because I just felt so ashamed. And like, I literally, if you know me, like, I'm just so driven by my vision, my personal vision in education. Like, I literally can't imagine doing anything else. That's not true. I literally can't imagine not doing that. Not fulfilling my personal mission, right? But I tried to think my way to a world where I could, because the shame was just so real. My moment of surrender, it really came, let's say, less moment and more months of surrender, which it sounds awful, and it was. And I understand how it ended up working to serve me, because like, with that much shame, like, the avoidance that I was engaging in to survive was real. Like, I look back and I recognize life, the universe, the divine was like, okay, we see you, we receive that. Like, we're going to make it so that you cannot escape this. Like, you have to surrender. It got to the point after I left, I felt like, and I left at an incredible low. Like, my business had already been like severely damaged. I stepped away from it. My finances were drained. I was estranged from so many people in my life. Like, I literally felt like I ruined my life. Even though I left with it, I was just kind of sitting. It's kind of like being in an abusive relationship is so absorbing that it's not that I didn't notice. I was able to dissociate from the impact it was having on my life. And I just couldn't dissociate in that way anymore when I left. I felt like I had nothing to lose, because my finances were destroyed. My business was at a halt. Everyone who I knew in my life that mattered knew what I had gone through, which was like one of the scariest things in the world. I was grieving the loss of all of my shoulds, and I was grieving my reality, because there was a certain level of, I knew it was bad, but I don't think I ever would have called it violent, even though that's what it was. And I was just like grieving my reality, like grieving that, wow, everything is really fucked up and ruined, and including like my mind, including my heart, like including like everything, even my consciousness, my thoughts. I felt like I didn't trust myself. Like, everything felt ruined. And I was in so much shame and in so much pain. I eventually realized, like, everything was so bad. I realized that if I didn't go through this, whatever this moment of life was trying to get me to confront, that I would have to do this again. Like, so on some level, that fucking clicked for me. And even though I didn't know a lot about what I wanted and like what the future would bring, I fucking knew I never wanted to do this shit again. Like, I knew that. Like, I was like, absolutely not. I realized, you know what? I might as well go there because it's all falling apart anyways, and my life has brought me here. Like, I kind of recognize, like, I have to be here to leave here. And that sort of moment shifted my relationship to shame enough to allow me, it's like shame, it's so interesting. Shame made me think I would die by saying certain things out loud. And I know that because, like, I literally would have rather, I would have endured much more painful things than to say the same shameful thing. Like, shame really felt like, yeah, like I thought I would die if I didn't say it. Or I thought I would die if I did speak to the thing. But this moment of surrender that brought me to, well, if I don't go through this, this is gonna happen again. That was like proximate to, it was like, it cracked enough of my relationship with shame. It's almost as if it, how can I describe it? It brought it to the point where, that moment of surrender was almost like a death of my attachment to, the pain I thought would come from exposing the things I felt ashamed about, right? So it almost made me like, it was like, almost like I almost invited an ego death, or it was like ego suicide, in the sense that I brought this moment of surrender and I started to say the shameful things fully expecting to die, like fully expecting for the world to crash, you know? And so I just sort of, and fully expecting the judgment of everybody. I just knew I had to say, I couldn't not do it anymore. I didn't want to be where I was. And so I had to try a different thing. And so that's the moment of surrender that really lasted for several months, which was excruciating. Oh my God, it was so excruciating. But this new strategy that I tried, which was in a safe space, and like my safe space, especially during that time, I had lots of them. I was literally in 3 different support groups with 3 different organizations, and I had like 3 one-on-one types of support. Like I had a therapist, a counselor, and an advocate, and I spoke to all of them like an hour per week. So like I just had a lot of safe spaces and a lot of support, and safe, even more so than a safe place, I had places where I believed, I still thought the world would end, but I found places that were more bearable to expose my shame than within the relationships I had in my life. There's something about being able to expose this rawness to strangers that felt safe. It was like, I think that's really what helped me kind of manage it. Like it still felt scary. It still felt terrifying. It still felt like the world would end, but I was like, I don't know these people. And so, you know, if it's that terrible and everything that they figure out about me is confirmed to be true, if I'm exposed as the fraud that I think I am, then I don't have to see these people ever again. Which is like, it's true, but also like that thought comforted me enough to take the risk. And the people I found in those places, I absolutely love. They inspired me to do this. But that's kind of, especially when I was first entering those spaces, like that's the mental warfare I had to sort through to be able to try this strategy. And so the step 1 of saying the shameful thing is to, I would say to myself, fuck it. Fuck it. I'm here. I'm gonna be here. Okay. The next thing would be to say the shameful thing and how I feel about it. So I would say, for example, I felt a lot of shame for how I felt after getting an order of protection, which I didn't want to do, but I legitimately felt scared. I felt scared for my life. And so, like, I literally had to remind myself every step of the way that that was true, to fight through all the other things. And I would, like, before, with my old strategy, I let myself sit in, so I got the order of protection, and afterwards I actually felt sad, and I actually felt devastated, and I felt, oh my gosh, it's really over. And then I felt deeply ashamed for feeling that way, for experiencing that moment as like proof that this relationship is over and that's a bad thing and I'm devastated and heartbroken. I felt incredible amounts of shame about that. And I did my live in the box thing. And then the next week came and it was time for support groups, and I decided to say, fuck it, like, I'm gonna speak to this. And so I said the thing, and I said how I feel about it. I said, I got an order of protection. I know I should feel good, but I feel shitty because I miss her so much. I'm devastated that it's officially over, that I've lost her approval, and I feel like ashamed, and I feel like pathetic for feeling that way. So I said the thing, and then I said how I felt about it, and then I waited. But I waited however many seconds it took for someone to respond, which of course felt like eons. It felt like, civilizations have risen and fallen in the time it took for people to respond, which of course wasn't true. I waited, and then the next step is to, I received how people responded. And how people responded in that instant was, which I was shocked about, but was like, me too. Like, here's a moment when I had to do this thing to protect myself, and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do literally anything else, but I felt afraid, and so I fucking did it. But I missed my person, and then I hated myself for saying I missed them or for calling them my person. So I was shocked that other people related to me. I genuinely believed I was alone, which that clearly wasn't the case, which it just clearly wasn't the case. Not only that, people and counselors just encouraged me to accept, said that it was okay. They said it was okay to feel this way. I was just like, what? How is it okay to feel this way? How is this not the worst way? How is this not the worst way in the world that no one should ever feel? And but I was like, I'm gonna receive how people respond. And then the next step is, I wondered, what if I accepted this as true? So I thought to myself, and this kind of had to be there was sort of a mind separation, things were shuffling in my mind, because the shame was so very real. And yet on a separate part of my mind, I was like, what if I accept that this is true? What if I accept that feeling this way is normal, and not only just normal, that it's okay? And I realized, well, if I accept, I was like, I'll entertain it. And I was like, I'll entertain entertaining it, because I'm not letting myself off the hook. But when I entertained entertaining it, I realized, okay, instead of feeling shame about how I feel, I could just feel how I feel. And I realized I just needed to grieve this change. And I needed to grieve the loss of what I thought I had and what I hoped for. I needed to grieve the death of all of those things. And there is nothing wrong with that. And not only that, I only realized coming through this, right? Because when I allowed myself to feel these things, I was free from them. And that's when I realized how shame, like I had a real distinct aha moment, particularly around this incident. Just because I was just so clear on the shame, and then I resisted letting myself feel how I felt because of the shame. And I just recognized when I let myself grieve the shift that happened. Like I was able to release it. And not only was I able to release it, it actually deepened my relationship with my inner child, with little Sable, and like the versions of me that came into this relationship. Like it made me so much more compassionate and kind to her, because that is the her, that is the me that was grieving. And like she was so devastated. And I was like, oh, it just made me want to hug her. Like I was like, okay, girl, you shed your little tears. And not your little tears, but like you just be where you are. And what's the next step? So yeah, the question of like, I receive how people respond. I wonder, what if I accept this is true? So like accepting that is true gave me space to grieve. And then the next step is to make a choice. I accept it. I accept whatever this is underneath the shame without judgment. I even if there's judgment in there, I accept it and I just let it be and let it breathe its life cycle, right? And then I made another choice. I made a choice to believe and release, which I kind of just alluded to earlier. I made a choice to believe that. And I was terrified to do this because of the shame. I thought there was something like, I don't know. It feels like I'm realizing I felt like shame. There's this phrase in my head coming up of like letting myself off the hook. And for some reason, I'm realizing I felt that shame would hold me accountable, but to what, I'm not sure. But I know there's a fear of not being accountable to that thing. But the next step was I chose to believe that it was okay to feel this way, and being able to do that, I was able to release. And then, when conflict remains, and not really just conflict, when the shame continues to linger or it comes back up, I find little Sable and I chat with her. I listen and I repeat the strategy that I just shared, where I say, fuck it, say the shameful thing and how I feel about it. I wait, I receive how people respond. I wonder, what if I accept this as true? I make a choice to accept it, and I make another choice to believe and release it. If after going through that whole process, the shame is still there and the conflict lingers, then I try that strategy again in another safe space, because what that did for me is it helped me gain more evidence. And that is the death of shame, is receipts on how much of a lie it is. And as I mentioned earlier, at the time that I was navigating this particular issue, I was in 3 different support groups and I had like 3 one-on-one support. And so my ability, like the rate in which I was able to process this was crazy fast. But that's relative. It's not about the speed. It's the amount of like the opportunities I had to speak about it. And the opportunities I had to receive how people respond and make that choice. Like every time I spoke on it, the shame got a little bit smaller. Every time I received how people responded, the shame got a little weaker. And every time I made a choice to, accept what the emotional experience the shame was trying to deny me, every time I accepted that emotional experience and I believed it, the shame got weaker. And so I was able to sort of I thought, especially when I first had that feeling, I thought it would take me months, years to recover from that. And I was able to move through that, like that deep shame and judgment around it, way more quickly than I would have possibly anticipated. Yeah. And so I think that also speaks, it for me, this is also a testament to having safe space, finding spaces. It speaks to finding, vetting, and being in safe spaces, right? Because even the support groups I was in, you know, it was a trial and error. Finding a support group is like finding a therapist, you know? You go online, you go to whatever resource center, you find people, you figure out the logistics of getting in, and you talk to somebody, and then you go for a few sessions, and you're like, do I like this? Do I not? I don't know. Plus, oh my God, is everyone gonna know everything about me right away? Like, it takes time. And so even now, I'm like, wow, I was able to, I'm really grateful for the way that I showed up for myself in being able to create and have access to all of those safe spaces at that particularly challenging time, because it really did support me in my healing. But yeah, that's a new strategy. So what that strategy does for me, saying the shameful thing, is absolutely, it helps me take my power back from shame, because shame absolutely controlled me. I would make so many decisions from a place of shame, and often those decisions made my world feel smaller and made the opportunities seem less and less. This strategy also helps normalize my shame, and I've started to like less feel mad at my shame and more like, ooh, kind of like the triggers as opportunities. Like, shame is sort of like a flag of, oh, this is something to explore here. This is something that is unexpressed that needs air to breathe, and it hasn't had it because it wasn't safe or it was labeled as wrong or whatever. And so this strategy definitely has normalized my shame and my relationship to it. And I feel like shame, yeah, in normalizing it, it's not a bad thing anymore. Now, it's just like a signal and a flag to me that something is asking for attention. It also made me feel less alone. I don't think I've ever spoken to one thing I felt ashamed about as it relates to my experience with abuse that no one has literally ever related. Like, I can't think of one thing I've ever said where someone has not said me too. Literally. I am just, and this is no matter what the background, this is like I've had this deep like points of relating and connection with literally anyone who's had this lived experience, regardless of their background. And that is wild to me. It's amazing. And it's wild to me because, you know, thinking about that pit at the bottom in the middle of the earth where you'll find me when I'm in a shame mountain, it's a very lonely place. And so it's quite literally in that space, it's inconceivable that anyone would understand, let alone relate. Another amazing thing that I love that this strategy does is that it gives me scripts, like saying the shameful thing in a safe place. People's responses gives me scripts to talk back to my shame when I'm outside the space, living my life, right? Like, I can hear what so-and-so said in group, and I repeat that. Like, it comes now when the shame pops up, it doesn't have free reign anymore. It's a little more crowded with positive energy. It's crowded with what other people said. So it literally doesn't take up as much space. It literally can't, because I now have these other scripts on how to respond to the shame, which I couldn't have generated on my own. Like, I had to take the scary risk of being vulnerable, allowing myself to be seen, to be able to access that. And as a result, it erodes slowly, or even honestly more quickly over time, because the shame doesn't have as much free reign. It has like, it gets eroded each and every time now because there's something to fight back. And I would say doing this has, using this strategy has also opened a new world of possible actions and opportunity for me without the shame. Because the problem with the shame is like, it tells me lies and the lies determine what's possible. And so I felt a lot of shame around how the abuse impacted my career and my business. And one of the big lies it told me is like, I've missed my chance, or no one's ever gonna trust me, and you're not worthy. And that would impact the actions I had the capacity to take. Like I just wouldn't, because I counted myself out. And dismantling my shame around that has like really made me believe that so much more is possible for myself. And now that I believe more is possible for myself, I'm able to act on what is possible for myself. And that whole line of thought, it feels so much more powerful. And it like fundamentally had to come from me. Like it had to come from within. Like no one could have thrown an Instagram quote at me and then bam, I'd be healed. No one could have told me, oh, you have to get out, or oh, you have to do this, or you have to do that. Like I had to allow myself to be seen. I had to allow people I trusted to bear witness to me, and I had to hear what they had to say and then integrate that. That is the only pathway for me having an expanded world without shame, which ultimately gave me hope, gave me lots and lots of hope, increasing amounts of hope, I should say, which is all good. Yeah, I'm just really grateful for this tool, and I'm so curious to hear what you think about it, how you relate to it. Like I really do want to know, because this is something in particular that I personally thought was impossible. I mean, bringing back to that hole in the middle of the earth where you find me, like in that space, it just seems so impossible that saying the shameful thing could lead to hope, to freedom, to not being alone, to power. That was inconceivable. And so I just feel really grateful and, surprisingly delighted by the gifts this particular healing tool has offered me that I never would have ever expected. So yeah, I would love to know what this healing tool does for you, what it's like when you try it out. Let your girl know. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.